The text message came through at 3:47 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I was sitting in my boutique office going over the books like I did every week when my phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting maybe a message from my daughter Tanisha about picking up my grandbabies from school. Instead, what I saw made my blood run cold. "Beatrice, I'm done. I filed for divorce this morning. Took what's mine from the account. Don't try to contact me. My lawyer will be in touch." Vernon. 72 years old, and my husband of 48 years had just divorced me through a text message. Not even a phone call, not even the decency to say it to my face. Just cold words on a screen, like I was some stranger he was brushing off. My hands started shaking so bad I nearly dropped the phone. I read it again, thinking maybe I had misunderstood. But no. Those words were clear as day. "Took what's mine from the account." I pulled up my banking app with trembling fingers, already knowing what I was going to find, but praying I was wrong. The joint checking account we'd had for decades, the one where we kept our household money, showed a balance of $47.32. Yesterday, it had over $65,000 in it. $65,000? Gone. That was our emergency fund. Money from selling our old house. Money I'd saved from the boutique. Money we were supposed to use to help Tanisha with her mortgage after her husband left her. Money for Isaiah's surgery next month because my grandson needed tubes in his ears and the insurance wouldn't cover all of it. Vernon had taken every penny. Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. I sat there in that office, surrounded by racks of beautiful clothes I'd carefully selected, in a business I'd built from nothing, and I felt like the walls were closing in. How could he do this? How could the man I'd spent almost 50 years with, the man I'd stood beside through everything, just throw me away like yesterday's trash? But even as my heart was breaking, even as tears started rolling down my face, a small voice in the back of my mind was saying, "You knew this was coming, Beatrice. You knew." See, the thing nobody tells you about getting old is that you become invisible. People stop seeing you as a whole person with feelings and dreams. They just see an old woman. Someone to be managed, someone to be handled, someone whose time has passed. And Vernon had started treating me that way about 3 years ago. It started small. He'd talk over me at family dinners. He'd make plans without telling me. He'd come home later and later from his job at the post office, even though he'd already retired. When I'd ask where he'd been, he'd snap at me, tell me I was being controlling, say I didn't need to know his every move. Then came the credit cards I didn't know about. The cash withdrawals he couldn't explain. The smell of perfume on his clothes that wasn't mine. The way he'd guard his phone like it held national secrets. I'm 72, not stupid. I knew what was happening. My husband was having an affair. What really broke my heart wasn't even the cheating, though Lord knows that hurt enough. It was the way he'd started looking at me with contempt, like I was some burden he couldn't wait to shed. Like all those years of marriage, of building a life together, of raising our children, meant nothing. So 6 months ago, when I found receipts for a hotel room and jewelry I'd never received, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait around to be destroyed. I was going to protect myself. I opened a new bank account at a different bank, one Vernon knew nothing about. Every week, I'd transfer a little money from my boutique earnings into that account. Not enough for him to notice, but enough to build up a cushion. I made sure my boutique, Bee's Closet, stayed in my name only. It always had been, since I'd started it 20 years ago with money from my mother's life insurance. But I had my lawyer friend Cordelia review all the paperwork, just to be sure. I kept the house in my name, too. That house wasn't joint property. It had been my mother's house, and she'd left it to me when she passed. Vernon had never been on the deed, though he seemed to have forgotten that fact over the years. I documented everything, every late night, every unexplained expense, every lie. I had a folder in my boutique office, safe with copies of bank statements, credit card bills, receipts, everything. I even hired a private investigator for 2 weeks. The photos he got weren't pretty, but they were proof. All of this I did quietly, carefully, while still being the dutiful wife at home, cooking dinner, doing laundry, smiling at church on Sundays. Nobody knew what I was planning, not even my best friend Cordelia, though she's the smartest lawyer in Atlanta and had been telling me for months that something wasn't right. But here's what I didn't know, what I couldn't have prepared for. My own children were in on it. I found out by accident, 3 weeks before that text message came through. I'd gone to visit my daughter Tanisha at her house, bringing groceries like I did every week because she was struggling since her divorce. I let myself in with my key, calling out that I was there, but nobody answered. I figured she was upstairs, so I put the groceries in the kitchen and went to use the bathroom. That's when I heard voices coming from her home office. The door was cracked open, and I heard my daughter's voice, clear as a bell. "Daddy said he's filing next month. Once the divorce goes through and he gets his half of everything, we'll split it 3 ways like we agreed. He thinks she's got at least $400,000 tied up in that boutique and the house. That's over $100,000 each." I froze in the hallway, my hand on the bathroom door handle. Another voice spoke up. My son, Curtis Jr. I'd recognize his deep voice anywhere. "You sure the house is joint property? Mama always said it was Grandma's house." "Daddy says after this many years of marriage it doesn't matter. Community property laws or something. His lawyer says he can claim half of everything, including the boutique. Mama's been running that store for 20 years. You know how much money she's got put away? She's always crying poor, but Daddy says she's sitting on a gold mine." "What about the grandkids?" That was Tanisha again, and my heart broke at how casual she sounded, like she was discussing the weather. "Isaiah needs that surgery. Mama can pay for it out of her half. She'll still have plenty. Besides, we need this money. I'm about to lose my house, Tanisha. And you're barely making rent since Wesley left. Daddy's doing us all a favor." I stood in that hallway, feeling like I'd been stabbed in the chest. My own children. My babies that I'd raised, that I'd sacrificed everything for. Tanisha, who I'd helped through her divorce, who I bought groceries for every single week. Curtis Jr., whose business I'd loaned $15,000 to just last year when he said he was in trouble. They were planning to rob me, working with their father to take everything I'd built, everything I'd earned, everything that was mine. And they were doing it with smiles on their faces, hugging me at Sunday dinner, calling me for advice, bringing my grandbabies over for me to babysit, all while planning to take me for every penny. I backed away from that office door as quietly as I could. I left the groceries on the counter and walked out of that house without saying a word. I sat in my car for 15 minutes, crying so hard I couldn't see straight. Then I dried my eyes, drove to Cordelia's law office, and told her everything. "Oh, Beatrice," she said, her face tight with anger. "Oh, honey, we're going to fix this, but we've got to move fast." That was 3 weeks ago. In those 3 weeks, Cordelia and I worked like we were preparing for war, because we were. We moved even more money into my private account. We documented every penny I'd put into Tanisha's household over the last 2 years, every grocery run, every utility bill I'd paid when she said she was short, every school supply for the grandkids, every tank of gas. We got affidavits from people who knew the house had been my mother's, not Vernon's. We prepared for battle. But I'd hoped, right up until that text message came through, that maybe I was wrong. Maybe Vernon would come to his senses. Maybe my children wouldn't really go through with it. The text message proved I'd been a fool to hope. I was still sitting in my office, staring at that message and my empty bank account, when my phone rang. It was Tanisha. "Hey, Mama," she said, her voice sticky sweet. "I was just calling to see if you could watch the kids Friday night. Curtis and I need to talk to you about something important." Something important. I bet they did. Probably wanted to act all surprised and supportive when I told them about the divorce. Probably wanted to start working on me, convincing me to be reasonable about the settlement, getting me to trust them while they helped Vernon rob me blind. "I'm a little busy right now, baby," I said, keeping my voice calm even though my heart was hammering. "Can we talk about it later?" "Oh." She sounded disappointed. "Well, okay, but Mama, are you all right? You sound funny." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired. I'll call you later." I hung up before she could say anything else. Then I called Cordelia. "He did it," I told her. "Text message divorce, and he cleaned out the joint account." "That fool." Cordelia's voice was sharp. "All right, we move to phase 2. Don't you worry, Bea. By the time we're done, Vernon Washington is going to wish he'd never been born." "Cordelia," I said, my voice breaking. "Tanisha just called. She wants to have a talk with me Friday. They're still playing their game." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Cordelia said, in a voice I'd never heard her use before, "Then we make them all pay. Every single one of them. You've got the documentation on everything you've given Tanisha? Every receipt, every bank transfer, 2 years' worth." "Good. And the private investigators' photos of Vernon?" "All of them, including the ones with his girlfriend." I heard Cordelia's sharp intake of breath. "His what?" That's when I realized I hadn't told her that part yet. "Her name is Shanice. She's 34 years old, works at his lodge. The PI got photos of them at hotels, restaurants, even at her apartment. He's been seeing her for at least 2 years, maybe longer." "Oh, this just gets better and better," Cordelia said, but there was no humor in her voice. "A 34-year-old girlfriend while you're 72. Georgia frowns on that kind of thing in divorce proceedings, especially when there's financial misconduct involved. Beatrice, honey, when I'm done with Vernon Washington, he won't have a pot to piss in." "What about my kids?" My voice cracked. "Cordelia, they're my babies. Even after what they're trying to do, they're still my babies." "I know, honey, I know. But sometimes the people we love hurt us the worst. And sometimes the only way to make them understand what they've done is to let them face the consequences. We'll protect those grandbabies of yours, don't you worry. But Tanisha and Curtis? They made their choice." That night, I didn't go home. I couldn't face that house, knowing Vernon wasn't there, knowing he'd left me like I was nothing. Instead, I stayed in my boutique's apartment upstairs. I'd kept it for late nights when I was doing inventory, but I'd never thought I'd actually need to live there. I lay in that bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about 48 years of marriage. I thought about the young man Vernon had been when we met, so handsome in his army uniform, so full of promise. I thought about our wedding day, how he'd cried when he said his vows. I thought about the births of our children, how he'd held my hand through the labor, how proud he'd been of our babies. I thought about building our life together, the struggles and the triumphs, the lean years when we had nothing but each other, the better years when we finally got ahead, the way he used to look at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the world. When had that changed? When had I become something to discard? But more than that, I thought about my children. Tanisha, my firstborn, who I'd rocked through colic and teething and nightmares, who I'd taught to braid hair and cook greens and stand up for herself. Curtis Jr., my baby boy, who I'd protected from bullies and helped with homework and cheered for at every football game. When had I become nothing more than a bank account to them? When had they learned to smile in my face while planning to stab me in the back? The next morning, I woke up with dry eyes and a clear head. I was done crying. I was done hoping they'd do the right thing. Now it was time to show them exactly who they'd decided to cross. I called Cordelia. "File the response papers. I want to fight this with everything we have." "That's my girl," Cordelia said. "Bea, when this is over, they're going to know they messed with the wrong woman." But before we could even file the papers, before the real battle even began, something happened that I never could have predicted. Vernon's lawyer called me. His name was Gordon Petty, and his voice was smooth as butter on the phone. "Mrs. Washington, I represent your husband in this divorce matter. He's prepared to be very generous in the settlement, but he needs you to cooperate. If you'll just sign these papers agreeing to a 50-50 split of all marital assets, including the boutique and the house, we can have this wrapped up in 60 days. No need for an ugly court battle. 50-50 split. Of my boutique that I'd built with my mother's money, of my house that my mother had left me, of everything I'd worked for. Mr. Petty, I said, my voice calm and cold. You tell Vernon that if he wants my business and my house, he can try to take them. But he better be prepared for the fight of his life. There was a pause. Mrs. Washington, I don't think you understand your legal position here. After 48 years of marriage, your husband is entitled to— My husband, I cut him off, is entitled to exactly what he brought into this marriage and exactly what he earned during it. My boutique was started with my mother's insurance money. My house was my mother's house. And if Vernon thinks he can steal from me and get away with it, he's about to learn different. I see. Mr. Petty's voice had gone cold. Then I suppose we'll see you in court, Mrs. Washington. But I should warn you, divorce litigation is expensive. Very expensive. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Mr. Petty, I said, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Tell Vernon I said good luck. He's going to need it. I hung up feeling strong for the first time since that text message had come through. But my strength was about to be tested in ways I never imagined. That evening, I was closing up the boutique when Tanisha and Curtis Jr. showed up together. They were both wearing concerned expressions, and I knew they'd heard about Vernon's lawyer calling me. Mama, Tanisha said, rushing forward to hug me. I let her, even though it felt like being hugged by a snake. Mama, we heard about Daddy. We're so sorry. This must be so hard for you. We're here for you, Curtis Jr. added, putting his hand on my shoulder. Whatever you need. I looked at my children at their lying faces, and something inside me snapped. What I need, I said slowly, pulling away from Tanisha, is for both of you to get out of my store. They both froze, confusion crossing their faces. Mama? Tanisha said. What's wrong? What's wrong? I repeated. What's wrong is that I know exactly what you two have been planning. I heard you, Tanisha. 3 weeks ago in your house. I heard every word. The blood drained from both their faces. Mama, I can explain, Curtis Jr. started. Explain? My voice rose. Explain how you've been plotting with your father to rob me? Explain how you were going to smile in my face while stealing my business? Explain how you were planning to take everything from me and split it 3 ways like I'm already dead? It's not like that, Tanisha said, but her voice was weak. We're struggling, Mama. We needed— You needed? I was shaking now. You needed? What about what I need? What about Isaiah's surgery? What about the thousands of dollars I've given you over the years? What about the fact that I'm your mother, and you were willing to destroy me for money? We weren't going to destroy you, Curtis Jr. said. You'd still have your half. My half? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. My half of what's mine? My half of the business I built from nothing? My half of the house my mother left me? There is no my half, Curtis. It's all mine. Every penny. And you and your sister and your father are about to find that out the hard way. Mama, please, Tanisha was crying now. We made a mistake. We're sorry. Can't we just— Get out, I said. Both of you, get out of my store and don't come back. You don't mean that, Curtis Jr. said. We're your children. My children died the day they decided to betray me, I said. The people standing in front of me right now, I don't know who you are, but you're not welcome here. They left, both of them crying, both of them trying to apologize. I locked the door behind them and collapsed into a chair, shaking all over. But I didn't cry. I couldn't afford to cry anymore. Because the war had officially begun, and I needed to be strong for what was coming. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Vernon had one more card to play. And when he played it, it would change everything. Vernon's card came in the form of a visit from Pastor Jerome 3 days later. Pastor Jerome had been our pastor at Mount Zion Baptist Church for 15 years, and he'd married Vernon and me, baptized our children, and buried my mother. When he showed up at my boutique that Thursday afternoon, I knew Vernon had gotten to him first. "Sister Beatrice," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "Can we talk?" I let him in, offered him sweet tea, and sat across from him in my office while he looked at me with sad eyes. "I spoke with Brother Vernon yesterday," he began. "He's deeply troubled by this whole situation. He tells me you're refusing to be reasonable about the divorce settlement." Reasonable. That word made my blood boil, but I kept my voice calm. "Pastor, did Vernon tell you he divorced me through a text message? Did he tell you he emptied our joint bank account without warning? Did he tell you about his girlfriend?" Pastor Jerome shifted uncomfortably. "He mentioned there had been some difficulties in the marriage. He says you've grown apart, that you've changed over the years. He says he's found companionship with someone who understands him better." Companionship. I set my tea down carefully, afraid I might throw it. "Pastor Jerome, Vernon has been having an affair with a woman half his age for at least 2 years. I have photographs. He stole $65,000 from our joint account. And now he's trying to take my business and my mother's house. Is that what you call difficulties in the marriage?" The pastor's face paled. "Sister Beatrice, he didn't mention. Of course he didn't. Men like Vernon never do." I pulled out my folder from the safe. "Pastor, I respect you and I respect the church, but I need you to understand something. My husband betrayed me in every way possible. My children are helping him try to rob me. And if Vernon sent you here to convince me to just lie down and let them take everything I've worked for, then he's wasted your time and mine." I opened the folder and spread out some of the private investigator's photos. Vernon and Shanice holding hands at a restaurant. Vernon and Shanice kissing outside her apartment. Vernon and Shanice checking into a hotel. Pastor Jerome looked at the photos, and I watched his face change from confusion to understanding, to anger. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "Long enough to protect myself, long enough to realize that the man I married doesn't exist anymore." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Sister Beatrice, I apologize. Brother Vernon told me a very different story. He made it sound like you were being vindictive, trying to keep him from getting what he deserved after all these years of marriage." "What he deserves," I said bitterly, "is to face the consequences of his choices. But instead he's trying to paint me as the villain while he steals from me." Pastor Jerome stood up, gathering the photos carefully and handing them back to me. "I'll be praying for you, Sister Beatrice, and I'll be having a very different conversation with Brother Vernon on Sunday. This isn't right. This isn't godly, and it's not what our church stands for." After he left, I felt a small measure of relief. At least someone was starting to see the truth. But that relief didn't last long. The next day, Friday, I got a call from my bank, the one where Vernon and I had the joint account, the one he'd emptied. "Mrs. Washington, this is Derek Chen from First National. I'm calling because there's been some unusual activity on your account. Someone attempted to withdraw funds this morning, but since the account balance is only $47, the transaction was declined. However, the person claimed they had authorization and became quite aggressive with our teller. We thought you should know." "Who was it?" I asked, though I already knew. "A Mr. Vernon Washington. He presented identification and demanded access to the account. When we explained the funds had already been withdrawn, he became irate. He's claiming you must have moved the money and demanding we tell him where." I almost laughed. Vernon had taken everything and now he was mad that there wasn't more to take? "Mr. Chen, Vernon Washington is my soon-to-be ex-husband. He withdrew those funds earlier this week without my knowledge. If he tries to access any account with my name on it again, please call the police. We'll make a note in your file, Mrs. Washington. I'm very sorry you're going through this. That afternoon, Vernon himself called me. It was the first time I'd heard his voice since the text message, and hearing it made my stomach twist. Beatrice, where's the money? No hello, no how are you, just demands. What money, Vernon? Don't play games with me. I know you moved it. That account should have had over 200,000 in it, not 65. Where's the rest? So that was his game. He'd thought there was more money in that account, and he was furious that he'd only gotten what was actually there. Vernon, that account had exactly what was in it. If you thought there was more, that's your mistake, not mine. I know you've been hiding money, Beatrice. I know you've got accounts I don't know about. You better tell me where that money is, or I'll make this divorce as ugly as possible. You already made it ugly when you threw away 48 years of marriage through a text message, I said. You already made it ugly when you stole from me. You already made it ugly when you chose your girlfriend over your wife. So go ahead, Vernon, make it uglier. See how that works out for you. You think you're so smart, he hissed. You think you can just cut me out? I built that boutique with you. I supported you while you were getting it started. I have a right to half of everything. You have a right to nothing, I said, and you're about to find that out in court. He hung up on me, but I was shaking when I put the phone down. Cordelia had warned me Vernon would escalate, but hearing the rage in his voice was frightening. This was a man I'd shared a bed with for nearly 50 years, and now he sounded like he hated me. That weekend, the church found out. Not because I told them. I hadn't told anyone but Cordelia and Pastor Jerome. But somehow word spread. Maybe the pastor said something to the deacons. Maybe someone at the bank talked. Maybe Vernon himself was running his mouth. However it happened, by Sunday morning, everyone at Mount Zion knew that Vernon had left me for a younger woman and tried to take everything I owned. I almost didn't go to church that Sunday. I didn't want to face the whispers and the stares. But Cordelia called me that morning and said, "Bea, you get yourself to that church. You hold your head high. You didn't do anything wrong, and you will not hide like you're the one who should be ashamed." So I went. I put on my best dress, the deep purple one with the gold buttons that I'd designed myself. I did my makeup carefully, making sure I looked strong and put together. And I walked into Mount Zion Baptist Church like I owned the place. The sanctuary went quiet when I walked in. Every head turned to look at me. I could feel the weight of their stares, could practically hear the thoughts running through their minds. But then something beautiful happened. Mother Phyllis, the oldest member of our congregation at 93 years old, stood up from her seat in the front row. She walked straight to me, took my hand, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sister Beatrice, you come sit with me today. Any woman strong enough to stand up for herself deserves a place of honor." And just like that, the tide shifted. Other women started standing up. Sister Geneva, who'd been divorced herself 20 years ago. Sister Loretta, whose husband had cheated on her with half the women in Atlanta before she'd finally left him. Sister Ramona, who'd raised 5 children alone after her husband abandoned them. They formed a circle around me, these strong black women who'd survived their own betrayals and come out the other side. And when we walked down that aisle together, I wasn't alone anymore. Vernon wasn't there, of course. He hadn't shown his face at Mount Zion since the divorce papers were filed. But Tanisha was there, sitting in the back with her children. Our eyes met across the sanctuary, and I saw guilt and shame in her face. Good. She should feel guilty. She should feel ashamed. Pastor Jerome's sermon that morning was about betrayal and redemption, about the importance of standing with those who are hurting rather than kicking them when they're down. He never mentioned names, but everyone knew who he was talking about. And when he called for the church to support and uplift Sister Beatrice Washington during her time of trial, the entire congregation stood and applauded. I cried then. I couldn't help it. These people, this community, they were choosing me. They were standing with me. And in that moment, I felt less alone than I had in months. After church, at least 30 people came up to me with offers of help. Sister Geneva gave me the name of her divorce lawyer, a woman named Rhonda Blackwell who was apparently a shark in the courtroom. Sister Ramona invited me to join her women's business group, a networking organization for Black female entrepreneurs. Mother Phyllis simply hugged me and whispered, "Make him pay, baby. Make him pay for every tear." But the most surprising support came from someone I never expected, Shanice's mother. Her name was Mrs. Gail Henderson, and she caught me in the parking lot as I was leaving. She was a small woman, probably in her 50s, with tired eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "Mrs. Washington," she said, "I need to talk to you about my daughter and your husband." My first instinct was to tell her to get away from me. Her daughter was the reason my marriage had exploded. But something in her face stopped me. "I'm listening," I said carefully. "My daughter Shanice, she's always been easily influenced. Always looking for an easy way, you know? When she started seeing your husband, I told her it was wrong. I told her he was married, that she was breaking up a home. But she wouldn't listen. She said Vernon was going to leave you, that he was going to marry her, that they were going to be together." Mrs. Henderson's voice cracked. "I'm not here to make excuses for her. What she did was wrong. But I wanted you to know that not everyone in my family thinks what happened is okay. And I wanted to warn you about something." "Warn me?" She looked around nervously, then leaned closer. "Shanice has been bragging to her friends that once Vernon gets his settlement money from you, they're going to move to Miami together. She's already picked out a condo she wants him to buy her. She's talking about a wedding, about starting a business, about all the things they're going to do with your money." The parking lot seemed to spin around me. Vernon wasn't just leaving me. He had a whole new life planned, with my money. Money he thought he was going to steal from me in the divorce. "How much does she think he's getting?" I asked. She told her friends at least $500,000, maybe more. Said Vernon told her you were loaded, that the boutique was worth a fortune, that the house was paid off. She's already spending the money in her head. Mrs. Henderson looked at me with sad eyes. "I know you don't owe me anything, Mrs. Washington, but I hope you take him for everything. My daughter needs to learn that you can't build happiness on someone else's pain. And your husband needs to learn that you can't just throw away a good woman for a pretty face." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing in that parking lot trying to process what she'd just told me. Vernon and Shanice were already planning their future, already counting money that wasn't theirs, already celebrating their victory. They had no idea what was coming. That Monday, Cordelia and I met with Rhonda Blackwell, the divorce lawyer Sister Geneva had recommended. Rhonda was a powerhouse, a tall Black woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. "Let me get this straight," she said, after I'd explained everything. "Your husband texted you a divorce notice, stole $65,000 from your joint account, is trying to claim half your business that you built with inheritance money, is trying to claim half the house your mother left you, and your own children are in on it." "That's right. And you have documentation of all of this? The inheritance papers, the house deed, proof of his affair, evidence of your children's involvement?" "Every piece of paper you could need." Rhonda smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted easy prey. "Mrs. Washington, by the time I'm done with Vernon and his lawyer, they're going to wish they'd never heard your name. This isn't just a divorce case. This is theft, fraud, and emotional abuse. We're going to destroy him." "What about my children?" I asked. "Can we make them pay back what they took from me? The groceries, the money, the support you gave Tanisha? If we can prove they were planning to defraud you while accepting your financial help, we might be able to pursue that. But Mrs. Washington, I have to ask, are you sure you want to go after your own children?" I thought about Tanisha's face in that office, casually discussing how to rob me. I thought about Curtis Jr. talking about losing his house like that justified stealing from his mother. I thought about both of them showing up at my boutique with fake tears and false sympathy. They made their choice, I said. Now they live with the consequences. All right then. Rhonda pulled out a legal pad. Let's get to work. We spent 3 hours going over everything. Cordelia and Rhonda worked together like a well-oiled machine, strategizing, planning, preparing for every possible move Vernon's lawyer might make. By the time we were done, I felt like I was armed for battle, but the real battle hadn't even started yet. That Wednesday, I got a call from my sister, Francine. We'd never been close. She lived in Detroit, and we maybe talked twice a year, but hearing her voice on the phone filled me with dread. Beatrice, what the hell is going on down there? Vernon called me. He says you're trying to steal everything from him in the divorce, that you've turned vicious, that you're refusing to be fair. Francine, that's not. He says you've got some lawyer trying to take him for everything he's got. He says you're being vengeful and cruel. Is that true? I took a deep breath. Did Vernon mention that he divorced me by text message? Did he mention his girlfriend? Did he mention stealing $65,000 from our account? Silence on the other end of the line. He told me you'd grown apart, Francine said finally. He didn't mention any of that other stuff. Of course he didn't. Vernon's playing victim, Francine. He's telling everyone I'm the bad guy while he's the one who destroyed our marriage and tried to rob me blind. Beatrice, he's family. He's been your husband for almost 50 years. Don't you think you're being a little harsh? Can't you just split things fairly and move on? Split things fairly? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Francine, he's trying to take the business I built with Mama's insurance money. He's trying to take the house Mama left me. There's nothing to split. It's mine. Everything's always been about you, hasn't it? Francine's voice had gone cold. Poor Beatrice, always the victim. Maybe Vernon had good reasons for leaving. Maybe you're not as innocent as you pretend to be. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there, staring at the phone, feeling like I'd been slapped. My own sister had just sided with my cheating, stealing husband over me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how quickly everyone had turned on me or questioned me. Vernon had managed to spin this whole thing so that some people actually thought I was the problem. My own sister believed his lies. How many other people had he poisoned against me? I got my answer the next morning when I arrived at the boutique to find graffiti sprayed across my front window. 3 words in red paint: greedy old witch. I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at those words, feeling violated all over again. Someone had done this. Someone had vandalized my business because they believed Vernon's lies. I called the police, filed a report, and called a cleaning company. But the damage was done, not just to my window, but to my sense of safety. Someone out there hated me enough to do this. The police officer who took my report was sympathetic, but not optimistic. Without cameras or witnesses, there's not much we can do, ma'am. Could be kids, could be someone with a grudge. You have any idea who might have done this? My soon-to-be ex-husband has been telling lies about me, I said. It could be someone who believed him. The officer nodded. Divorce cases can get ugly. I'd recommend installing security cameras, maybe hiring a security company to patrol at night. And if you feel threatened in any way, don't hesitate to call us. After he left, I stood in front of my boutique, looking at the crew scrubbing away the graffiti, and I felt something shift inside me. I'd been playing defense this whole time, protecting myself, documenting everything, preparing for court. But Vernon was on offense, attacking me, spreading lies, turning people against me. It was time to change tactics. I called Rhonda. I want to file a motion for emergency relief. I want the judge to know what Vernon did, the affair, the theft, all of it. I want him to have to answer for this publicly, and I want to request that he pay my legal fees because of his financial misconduct. Now you're talking, Rhonda said. Let me draw up the paperwork. We'll have it filed by tomorrow morning. That afternoon, I did something I'd been putting off. I went to see my grandbabies. Tanisha had been keeping them away from me since our confrontation at the boutique, but I had legal grandparent visitation rights, and I was going to use them. I showed up at Tanisha's house after school knowing the kids would be home. When I knocked, Tanisha opened the door with a cold expression. "Mama, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to see my grandchildren." "You've been keeping them from me." "I don't think that's a good idea right now. You're going through a lot, and the kids don't need to be around all this drama." "The drama your father and you created?" I pushed past her into the house. "Isaiah! Kenya! Grandma's here!" My grandbabies came running, squealing with excitement. Isaiah, who was 8, crashed into my legs with a hug. Kenya, who was 6, jumped up and down, clapping her hands. "Grandma, we missed you. Mama said you were busy." I knelt down and hugged them both, breathing in their little kid smell of sweat and candy and joy. "I missed you too, babies. So much." "Mama, you need to leave," Tanisha said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. She knew that if I made this a legal issue, she'd lose. "I'll leave," I said, standing up. "But I'm taking the kids for ice cream first. And Tanisha, you need to understand something. I am their grandmother. You can try to keep me away, but I will fight you in court if I have to. These babies need me, and I need them. Your betrayal doesn't change that." Tears welled up in Tanisha's eyes. "Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." "Sorry doesn't give me back what you tried to take," I said. "Sorry doesn't undo the planning and the plotting. But maybe, someday, if you actually mean it, we can talk. Until then, I'll see my grandchildren whenever I want. Are we clear?" She nodded, crying openly now. I took Isaiah and Kenya out for ice cream, and for an hour, I forgot about the divorce and the betrayal and the pain. I just enjoyed being grandma, listening to their stories about school, helping Kenya with her math homework at the ice cream shop table, laughing at Isaiah's jokes. But when I took them home, reality came crashing back. Because waiting in Tanisha's driveway was Vernon's car, and standing next to it, looking furious, was Vernon himself. He'd found out about the emergency motion, and he was not happy. Vernon looked older than I remembered. It had only been 2 weeks since he'd left, but he looked like he'd aged years. His face was haggard, his eyes were bloodshot, and when he stepped toward me, I could smell alcohol on his breath. "You filed a motion against me?" he shouted. "You're trying to make me look like a criminal in court?" I put myself between him and the kids, who'd gone quiet and scared behind me. "Vernon, you're drunk. Get away from me and away from these children. Don't tell me what to do. You think you can just destroy me? Tell the whole world about Shanice? Make me pay your lawyer fees?" "You destroyed yourself," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. "You cheated. You stole. You threw away our marriage. I'm just making sure the truth comes out." "The truth?" He laughed bitterly. "The truth is that you're a cold, selfish woman who cares more about money than her own family. The truth is that I haven't been happy in 20 years, but I stayed because I felt sorry for you." "Daddy, please." Tanisha had come out of the house, wringing her hands. "Please don't do this in front of the kids." "Stay out of this, Tanisha. Your mother needs to understand that she can't just—" "Mr. Washington, I'm going to need you to step back." We all turned to see a police car pulling up to the curb. The same officer who'd taken the report about my vandalized window was getting out, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Officer, this is a family matter," Vernon said, trying to sound sober and reasonable. "Sir, I got a call about a disturbance, and I can smell alcohol on you from here. Have you been drinking and driving?" Vernon's face went pale. "I had 1 beer with lunch. I'm fine to drive." "Why don't we make sure of that? I'm going to need you to take a breathalyzer test." What happened next was almost too perfect. Vernon failed the breathalyzer, not by much, but enough. The officer arrested him for DUI right there in Tanisha's driveway. with his grandbabies watching, with me standing there seeing karma work in real time. As they put him in the police car, Vernon looked at me with pure hatred. "This is your fault. You called them." "I didn't," I said honestly, "but I'm glad they came." Later, I found out it was Tanisha who'd called the police. She'd seen Vernon's car weaving when he pulled up and knew he'd been drinking. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, my daughter had protected me instead of betraying me. The DUI arrest was just the beginning of Vernon's downfall. The emergency motion hearing happened 3 days later. Rhonda had prepared me for what to expect, but nothing could have prepared me for actually sitting in that courtroom, facing Vernon across the aisle, with a judge deciding our fate. Judge Patricia Morrison was a black woman in her 60s, known for being tough but fair. She read through our motion carefully, then looked at Vernon's lawyer, Mr. Petty, with raised eyebrows. "Mr. Petty, your client withdrew $65,000 from a joint account without informing his wife, then filed for divorce via text message. Is that correct?" "Your Honor, my client felt he was entitled to those funds as they were marital property. I didn't ask what he felt entitled to. I asked if that's what he did." Mr. Petty shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, Your Honor." "And he's now claiming he's entitled to half of Mrs. Washington's business, which she started with inheritance money from her mother, and half of the house her mother left her?" "Your Honor, after 48 years of marriage, we believe community property laws—" "Mr. Petty, I'm familiar with community property laws. I'm also familiar with separate property, which is what inheritance constitutes." Judge Morrison turned to me. "Mrs. Washington, do you have documentation proving the boutique was started with inheritance funds?" Rhonda stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. We have the insurance payout documentation from Mrs. Washington's mother's death in 2003. Bank records showing the deposit of those funds into a business account, and articles of incorporation showing that B's Closet was established in Mrs. Washington's name only in 2004. And the house? We have the deed showing the property was transferred to Mrs. Washington upon her mother's death in 1998, with no additions or changes to the deed since then. Mr. Washington has never had an ownership stake in that property." Judge Morrison looked at Vernon with something like disgust. "So let me understand this correctly, Mr. Washington. You're trying to claim half of property that was never yours, while having emptied a joint account and conducted an extramarital affair. Do I have that right?" Vernon stood up, ignoring his lawyer's attempts to pull him back down. "Your Honor, I supported my wife while she built that business. You deserve nothing," Judge Morrison cut him off. "Sit down, Mr. Washington, before I hold you in contempt. Mrs. Washington, do you have evidence of the affair?" Rhonda handed over the private investigator's photos. The judge looked through them, her face getting harder with each image. "Mr. Petty, does your client have any legitimate claim to any of Mrs. Washington's separate property?" Mr. Petty looked defeated. "Your Honor, we believe that the length of the marriage is irrelevant when it comes to inherited property and businesses started with inheritance funds. Here's what's going to happen. Mr. Washington, you are ordered to return the $65,000 you took from the joint account within 30 days. You are ordered to pay Mrs. Washington's legal fees up to this point, which I'm setting at $15,000. And you are prohibited from making any further claims on B's Closet or the property on Elmwood Drive. Do you understand?" Vernon looked like he'd been punched. "Your Honor, I don't have that money anymore. I spent it on—" "I don't care what you spent it on. You stole it, now you pay it back. We'll reconvene in 30 days for the final divorce hearing, at which point we'll divide any actual marital property. But let me be clear, Mrs. Washington's business and home are off the table, permanently." That night, Cordelia, Rhonda, and I celebrated at my favorite restaurant. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. "Did you see Vernon's face when the judge ordered him to pay you back?" Cordelia laughed. "I thought he was going to have a heart attack right there." "He doesn't have that money," I said. "He spent it all on Shanice, hotel rooms, jewelry, clothes, that trip to Miami they took last month." "Then he better find it," Rhonda said, "because if he doesn't pay up in 30 days, I'll have the sheriff garnishing his wages and seizing his assets." But Vernon had bigger problems than just paying me back. The DUI arrest had cost him his job at the lodge where he'd worked for the past 5 years. They had a zero-tolerance policy for drunk driving, especially since he'd been driving a company vehicle when he got pulled over. Without that job, he had no income to pay me back with. Shanice found out about the job loss before I did, and that's when everything fell apart for Vernon. Mother Phyllis was the one who told me, gleefully, after church the following Sunday, "Baby, you should have seen it. That girl Shanice came into Bessie's hair salon yesterday crying her eyes out. Said Vernon had been lying to her about everything. Said he didn't have any money, wasn't getting any money, and had lost his job. She broke up with him right there on the phone while she was getting her hair done." The whole salon heard it. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt sad. Vernon had thrown away everything for a woman who only wanted him for money he didn't have. But the universe wasn't done with Vernon yet. 2 weeks after the emergency hearing, Curtis Jr. called me. It was the first time we'd spoken since I'd thrown him out of the boutique. "Mama," he said, his voice small, "Daddy's living with Grandma and Grandpa. He doesn't have anywhere else to go." Vernon's parents were in their 90s, living in a small senior apartment in East Point. The thought of 70-year-old Vernon sleeping on their couch would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. "That's not my problem, Curtis. Mama, I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything, but I need to say I'm sorry. We were wrong. I was wrong. Daddy convinced us that you had all this money hidden away, that you were being selfish, that we deserved a share. We believed him because we wanted to believe him. But seeing what he's become, seeing what he did to you, Mama, I'm ashamed." I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to forgive him right then. Part of me wanted my son back. But the hurt was too deep. "Curtis, I appreciate the apology. I do. But words are easy. You plotted to rob your own mother. You smiled in my face while planning to destroy me. That's not something I can just forget." "I know. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm just asking for a chance, someday, to make it right." "Maybe someday," I said. "But not today." The final divorce hearing happened on a rainy Tuesday in March. Vernon showed up looking haggard and defeated. He'd lost weight, his clothes hung on him, and he looked every bit of his 70 years. He couldn't pay back the $65,000. He'd managed to scrape together $20,000 by selling his car and borrowing from friends, but that left $45,000 still owed. Judge Morrison was not pleased. "Mr. Washington, I gave you a direct order to return those funds. You've only paid back a third of what you stole. That tells me you're either unwilling or unable to follow court orders." "Your Honor, I'm trying. I just don't have—" "You had it when you took it from Mrs. Washington. You spent it on your girlfriend and your lifestyle instead of on your family. Now you're facing the consequences. I'm garnishing your Social Security checks until the debt is paid. That's $400 a month until you've paid every penny back." Vernon's lawyer tried to argue, but it was hopeless. The judge had made up her mind. The final settlement was everything I'd hoped for. I kept the boutique, the house, my separate bank accounts, and my car. Vernon got his pension, his personal belongings, and the humiliation of knowing he'd destroyed his life for nothing. As we left the courthouse, Vernon tried to approach me one last time. "Beatrice, please, can we talk? Can we try to work this out?" I looked at the man I'd spent 48 years married to, and I felt nothing but pity. "There's nothing to work out, Vernon. You made your choices. Now live with them." "I made a mistake. Shanice was a mistake. Leaving you was a mistake. Can't we try again?" "No," I said simply. "We can't. Goodbye, Vernon." That should have been the end of it. But Vernon tried 2 more times over the next 6 months to challenge the divorce settlement. Each time, his motions were denied. Each time, he had to pay more legal fees. Each time, he sank deeper into debt. Meanwhile, I was rising. The publicity from the divorce, surprisingly, had been good for business. Women started coming to Bee's closet specifically because they'd heard about the owner who'd stood up to her cheating husband and won. They wanted to support a business owned by a strong Black woman who refused to be a victim. Within a year, I'd opened a second location in Buckhead. Within 2 years, a third in Midtown. By the end of the third year, I had 5 boutiques across Atlanta, and I'd hired a business manager to help me run them all. But more than that, I'd found my voice. I started speaking at women's business conferences about financial independence, about protecting yourself, about building something that nobody can take away from you. I spoke at churches about surviving betrayal and finding strength in faith. I spoke at divorce support groups about coming out the other side stronger than before. I became known not as Vernon Washington's ex-wife, but as Beatrice Washington, entrepreneur and survivor. The most surprising moment came 2 years after the divorce was finalized. I was at a women's empowerment conference where I'd just finished giving a speech about financial independence in marriage. As I was packing up my materials, a young woman approached me. It was Shanice. She looked different than she had in the private investigator's photos. Older, more tired, less polished. She stood in front of me, twisting her hands nervously. "Mrs. Washington, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. I was young and stupid and greedy, and I destroyed a marriage that should have been sacred. My mama was right about everything. You were right about everything." I studied her for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to be better than I was. Because what I did to you was wrong, and I need to own that. And because—" She took a deep breath. "Because I heard your speech today about women supporting women, and I realized I'd been the worst kind of woman. The kind who tears other women down for her own benefit." "What happened between you and Vernon?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. "He wanted me to stay with him even after he lost everything. He kept promising that he'd get money from you, that he'd get back on his feet, that we'd still have our life together. But I knew the truth. He'd never had anything to offer but stolen money and empty promises. I left him, and I haven't seen him since." She paused, then added quietly, "I heard he's working at a grocery store now, bagging groceries at 70 years old because nobody else will hire him with his record." I should have felt satisfaction at that news. Vernon Washington, who'd thought he could steal my business and my home, was now bagging groceries while I ran a multi-location boutique empire. But mostly I just felt sad for the waste of it all. "I hope you learn from your mistakes," I told Shanice. "We all make them. It's what we do after that counts." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked away. 6 months after that, something else surprising happened. Tanisha showed up at my flagship boutique with an envelope. "Mama, I know you don't want to see me. I know I don't deserve your time, but I needed to give you this." Inside the envelope was a check for $25,000. "Tanisha, what?" "It's not enough. It's nowhere near enough to make up for what I tried to do to you. But it's everything I've managed to save over the last 3 years. I got a better job. I stopped living beyond my means, and I've been putting money aside specifically to pay you back for all the help you gave me that I was planning to betray you over." She was crying now. "Mama, I was so wrong. I was struggling financially, and instead of appreciating everything you did for me, I got jealous and greedy. Daddy convinced me that you owed us, that we deserved a share of what you'd built. But you didn't owe us anything. You gave us everything out of love, and we were planning to steal even more." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw genuine remorse. Saw someone who'd spent 3 years thinking about what she'd done and trying to be better. "I don't want your money, Tanisha." "Mama, please, I need to do this. I need to make it right." I thought about it for a long moment. Then I said, "Put it in a college fund for Isaiah and Kenya. That's how you make it right. By making sure your children never have to struggle the way you did. By teaching them the value of honesty and integrity." By being a better mother than you were a daughter. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Can I hug you? I hesitated. The hurt was still there, probably always would be, but she was still my daughter, and she was trying. One hug, I said, and then we'll see about the rest. She hugged me tight, and I let myself hold my baby girl one more time. We weren't fixed. We might never be what we were. But maybe, just maybe, we could be something new. Curtis Jr. came around too, eventually. He couldn't pay me back financially. He'd lost his house and filed for bankruptcy, but he started showing up at my speaking events, supporting me, telling people his story of how greed had almost destroyed his relationship with his mother. He became an advocate for financial literacy and family honesty. My grandbabies never knew the full story of what their parents had tried to do. They just knew that Grandma Beatrice was successful and strong, and that family was important, but so was standing up for yourself. Today, 5 years after that text message came through, I'm 77 years old. I have 5 thriving boutiques. I've spoken at over 100 conferences. I've been featured in magazines about entrepreneurship and resilience. I've helped dozens of women protect themselves financially before and during divorces. Vernon is 75 now, still bagging groceries, still paying back that garnished debt, $400 a month like clockwork. We see each other sometimes at family events, weddings, graduations, funerals. We're civil, polite even, but we're strangers who used to know each other. His own parents, before they passed last year, apologized to me for their son's behavior. We raised him better than that, his mother said at his father's funeral. We're sorry he forgot what we taught him. Sometimes people ask me if I regret fighting so hard, if I wish I'd just taken the easy way and given Vernon what he wanted for the sake of peace. I tell them the same thing every time. I regret the pain. I regret the betrayal. I regret what could have been if Vernon had been a better man and my children had been better people. But I don't regret fighting for what was mine. I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret showing my grandbabies that their grandmother is strong and won't be defeated. Because at the end of the day, Vernon thought he was divorcing a weak-old woman who would just accept whatever he decided to do to her. Instead, he divorced a warrior who refused to go down without a fight. And I didn't just survive. I thrived. My husband divorced me by text message and emptied our joint account. He thought he knew what was coming. He thought he'd broken me. He thought he'd won. He had no idea. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.